when you're securely attached into adulthood, you tend to be a bit more forgiving. Interesting.
Absolutely.
And understanding.
Hey, Michael.
Cheers.
Cheers. Today, ASMR.
Just spilled.
Oh, no.
Sorry.
Today we're having a French 75. Yeah, try not to get all those noises in there.
Why?
French 75. It's a classic cocktail.
The first time I had a French 75?
No?
With you all.
Was it really? Mm-hmm. Glad we got to introduce you to that. Because you love gin.
I absolutely love gin.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of gin. It's all the herbiness. But the amount of lemon in this takes out a lot of the herbaceous juniper. And
I think one of your colleagues and practice mates turned me on to gin.
Oh, yeah. Do you want to name him by name?
I mean, I don't know. He wants to be named by name. I don't know.
We value consent here, so.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we'll refrain. But
the one dude in your other practice, it's him.
He does like gin.
Yeah.
Quite a bit, yeah. Yeah, he's the gin guy. I'm the bourbon guy in the office.
And you helped me get interested in bourbon, too.
Come to the dark side.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Old fashioned.
Look forward to making more.
No, but this has become a standard drink in our household.
In the Leach household.
But it's a morning drink for me. It's not an evening drink.
Interesting. Yeah. It's close to a mimosa because it has the champagne in it. But I think it's like a beginning. What do you call that? Not an aperitif. That's after dinner. It's not an amuse-bouche. That's food. But it's like a pre-dinner cocktail.
Something to help. That's not an aperitif. That's afterwards.
Oh, I could. Who knows? Sometimes I make stuff up. Just trying to get the world understood. So this is a French 75. It is made with brown raw sugar simple syrup. So usually they're a little bit lighter. And this one's darker because I forgot the simple syrup. And we made our own.
Yes, you did.
With a hot water kettle and
40 sleeves of individually portioned
raw sugar. But it works.
Absolutely.
We made it happen.
Delicious.
So just for you at home, the recipe we'll put somewhere when we post things, but it's 1.5 gin, 3/4 ounce of simple syrup, and then half a lemon topped with champagne. Very refreshing.
Or any sparkling.
Sparkling. Yeah. You could even do a topo on top of it if you didn't want to be as booze forward.
Yeah.
But that's not how we roll here.
Nope. Cheers. Not true.
But then we're going to do a half ounce of simple syrup. And Michael Leach makes his own simple.
Always.
And she thick.
This time I made it.
We went a little too long.
Yes.
On the stovetop.
Look at how.
Drip. It's lovely though, right? So it's those 3 ingredients. You take that. And this episode is brought to you by Yeti. This is one of my favorite things. The Yeti tumbler with the Yeti shaker top. Yeti, sponsor us. This is gonna be so loud. What are we gonna do? We're shaking it out. Because there's something about it. So we shook that. And they're gonna just pour that into a lovely champagne glass.
Pretty.
And then we're gonna top with champagne. I'm gonna let you do that.
And also, technically not champagne, because champagne can only be made in France. It's some sort of, this is Prosecco. So, because we're Italians. Favorite sound.
All right. We're going to top with a little champagne. Bring it to the top. And then we're going to garnish with a little lemon ribbon.
Yeah. And you wrap it around your swizzle stir.
There we go.
And then next to the curls.
French 75. Cheers.
Cheers.
Today we are talking about one of the 4 attachment styles, attachment classification. Did we ever talk about last time what we're going to call that? Because apparently since we've had our last record our last episode, language has mattered. Which if you know Michael Leach, language always matters.
Yes.
And I'm much more cavalier. But so I can appreciate that. But before we go to secure, did we talk about how we would talk about the 4 attachments?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, my preference is a deference to the classification language rather than styles. because it helps keep attachment anchored in science.
Okay.
And these labels that we've now used,
he just used the word,
be it secure or insecure or secure, anxious, entangled, ambivalent, dismissive, avoidant. You know, these labels, and disorganized. These labels mean something specific, and they are derived from a scientific study to see, or, you know, a series of studies across 30, 40, 50, 60 years now.
Sure. Yeah.
That are particular. And so, I don't know, for some reason, styles evokes that some of us like comfortable wear, some of us like more formal wear. Some of us have a yacht style, and some of us have a beach style, city, urban, you know, style.
Yeah. I'm still probably going to use style along the way just because it's part of my vernacular that I use quite often. So I think a distinction is that we're going to constantly go back and forth on is just because our backgrounds, like you're going to be more rooted in. And so I think that's a place that we can complement each other. It doesn't have to be a major difference, but that's why, it is going to be a style for me, but I want to, try to not make it confusing for everyone to hear it when we talk about this.
Yeah. I'm always going to be using the language of classification because I'm going to be thinking about how we scientifically arrive at understanding and determining your classification or a patient's classification, and see why that classification holds together and is distinct from a different classification.
Yeah. Well, and it already breaks down for me here because as we talk about the first one we're going to talk about, which is secure classification, I really wouldn't use the word secure style.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. Secure is almost a place to arrive versus a style for me when I'm working with couples. In particular, like when I see the security, I'm like, oh, look, you just did it. We're here.
Yeah.
How exciting. And so, that's interesting. I wouldn't have thought about that. But we're going to talk about secure classification, secure attachment.
Yeah, it's a good place to start.
Yeah.
The prototype, the ideal.
I know. I obviously want to start at the most negative, which is all the insecurities. So this is a stretch goal to start with the good.
Yeah.
And so, we'll just jump right into it. And I'll just ask, why does secure matter? So the secure classification and being able to live, breathe, exist in a secure attachment. Why would that even matter?
Yeah, a secure attachment, a secure style, a secure capacity. It matters because it is a core need, and that is something that we might maybe take for granted given our particular location in the 21st century now. But at a certain point in time in Western science, we did not think that relationships were on the same plane of importance, particularly in children, as things like food, being safe from infections and germs.
Right.
And so we sort of de-emphasized in our public policy, in our practice of medicine, in our practice of child rearing, we de-emphasize the role and the need of relationships.
Yeah. So even in like before the strange situation experiment.
Yep. Mary Ainsworth, the researcher.
Right. So before that, Bowlby, and there were several others. It's not Lorenz. Anyways, I can go back and check. There's at least two other researchers that weren't necessarily in psychology, but when studying post-war orphanages, where they really discovered that when children aren't provided care, they're given everything, the necessities, they're given food, they're given shelter, they're given medical attention, but their brains don't continue to develop and or they die when they're not given physical touch and emotional attunement.
Yes.
And so I think that's where it started, this understanding of like, no, this matters. So our relational dynamic matters gravely.
Yeah, our relational needs are on the same core requirement to develop into healthy, normal, functioning human beings as food.
Yeah.
And sleep. Yeah, I think it's called the child guidance movement.
Okay.
That is in hospitals, it's in orphanages, it's in...
Which is so odd to think, because I came from, a lot of this was already studied. I'm an 80s baby. Mm-hmm. And so the idea of parents not allowed to come into a hospital when you're there, or if you had an extended stay at a hospital, parents are asked to leave, just blows my mind. Like, it's just so commonplace of why would you ever do that?
Yep.
But through the development of this, it was just standard care.
Standard care in part because there were ideas that dominated the practice of medicine.
Yeah.
And one of the main ideas was to reduce any possibility of bacteria infection. We needed a sterile environment, which of course was one of the greatest inventions in medicine. Hand washing,
right,
was one of the greatest medical interventions, that once we understood how infections work. And so you get these hospitals prizing sterility. Is that a word?
Sterility?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Sterile environments.
We're on the mental health side.
Yeah, that's right. And so if you had visiting hours that were just unending and all the time, you're going to increase the likelihood or the possibility of infections coming into the hospital. And so we reduce those possibilities.
Yeah.
So that my parents, when I was a kid of the 70s and I was in the hospital for much of my childhood, my parents had maybe 3 hours a day that they could visit me. Yeah. And so the child guidance movement and attachment in Bowlby, our great-grandfather here, really helps shift our attention to, and through a scientific study of it, that relationships and being related to is crucial to our capacity to be human, just as much as it is food.
Right.
If you don't have food, you don't have life. If you don't have relationships, you don't have life. Yeah, and so when relationships are withheld from you, or they're erratic or unattuned and not highly sensitive, you are just as affected as you are when you don't have access to food and you go long periods of time of starvation or malnourished.
Right.
You're physically affected just the same.
And I would also say we become desperate and therefore react and behave differently.
That's right.
In a desperate attempt to get our needs met.
Based on those experiences that were repeated and across time.
Yeah.
Crucial periods of our development. Yeah. Yeah. So we should care about this. All people should care about this because these are our foundational needs. Relationships and being related to are our absolute foundational needs to being human.
Yeah.
It's simple.
It's simple yet so daunting.
Yeah, what do you mean daunting? I don't disagree.
Well, I think that it leads to my next question of how does it develop? What's the importance of the development of secure attachment, secure classification? And the daunting piece is once we hear about it, there's a natural need to be like, oh, if I do everything right, I'll get this. And so it can create a sense of anxiety and panic or not. And we'll talk about that in a future podcast a little bit more, but daunting in that when we hear a script for how does this develop, it opens up for a lot of people, I think, some concerns, the development of many blogs, the development of many strong opinions. Yeah. So,
well, I think a key piece of it is to focus on caregiving responsiveness, highly sensitive caregiving. And by sensitive, that's not the same thing as saying ingratiating. That's not the same thing as saying indulgence per se, but it is that exquisitely sophisticated, perceptive, sensitive to the unique needs of that unique child. Because not every child's going to need the same things,
right?
With the exception of they need highly sensitive caregiving,
relationship,
i.e., relationship, and so this security of attachment emerges from not just one event. Good Lord, and thank God.
Praise God, right? Because we all have that one event in our mind, maybe, as we're thinking about this, that we blame maybe some of the insecure attachments on.
Especially if we're insecurely attached.
Right.
Because with security of attachment, we will get to later, we tend to be freer from that kind of entrapped entanglement with a particular experience. Yeah. That's into adulthood. You tend to be a bit more forgiving, interesting.
Absolutely.
And understanding. And that you can understand your caregiving experiences within a context and your own parents' capacities or your general caregiver's capacities. But yeah, so this attachment, the security of attachment is emerging from repeated experiences across all of perhaps development, but exquisitely and particularly during our first couple years of life.
Right, which we talked about in the first one, like when you're talking about the science of attachment, which I'm going to hit up against. I think there's been a lot of science since then, a lot of studies, case studies that don't just focus on those first 2 years of life, 6 months to first 2 years,
absolutely,
right?
As there should be. And I'm sure we're going to get clear information and an understanding of why a certain portion of people don't have the same sort of attachment classification as they have as a 3-4-year-old,
right,
versus as a 21-year-old. Even though 75% of us will have that same classification, we're going to figure out what's happening with them 25% with more science.
I'm going to throw you a curveball. I think what I'm going to push for is that not in every relationship do we have the same attachment classification.
Yeah, that's what
in adulthood.
We will definitely knock heads.
But it'll be fine.
Yeah, it'll totally be fine.
Because we're both secure.
Cheers.
So with that, how does it develop? Like not beyond, because it always includes the sensitive caregiving. But how does our body metabolize, internalize all these events? It's not just one event. Right. It's consecutive caregiving techniques, strategies. I don't even know if I like that language, but existence.
Yeah. So this child is existing in a social world that it is highly dependent upon in order to have its needs met. And depending on the sensitivity of that caregiving, it is informing and shaping and determining how the brain is going to finish its development now that the child is born. You get the foundation happening in utero.
Right.
But now, once the child is born, it needs to pare down all of this brain connectivity that it has and all this potentiality. It has billions of neurons and it doesn't need all of them, and trillions of connections, and it doesn't need all of them. We need to become more efficient. And that efficiency of the brain neural system is highly dependent on, or it reflects the quality of those maternal caregiving experiences across time. And so the security of attachment in that infant emerges when a parent is highly attuned to what the child needs. So for example, if the child is needing food and it's hungry, that highly sensitive caregiver will accurately perceive those cues in the infant as a hunger need. Or if it's bored, or if it's got gas and tummy hurts, or if it just wants to be held, the child.
Right. I think one of the ways I talk to my families that I work with now, like that word attunement, some people, it can be confusing. And there's the concept of curiosity is something I always tie to it.
Yeah.
And wish we could extend it into our adult relationships. Absolutely. Is what I try to get them to do quite often is, think of the infant that we didn't have much threat with and being able to ask for what they need. We go through a whole list of, do you need your diaper changed? Are you hungry? Do you have gas?
Yeah.
And we go through all those things. And then once we get to it and we attune, but all along that way of trying to attune, we're taking guesses, we're taking leaps, we're taking risk.
Yeah.
And then when we get to it, it's like, that's what you needed. And I'm right here to provide it.
And those those securely attached adults go through that process with a bit of greater ease. They never go through it with perfection, because perfection's not real.
Right.
And they're never going to get it right 100% of the time. That's not necessary, because it's not possible. But they do seem to move through that with a greater ease and a greater effectiveness, greater accuracy.
Yeah, the word in my mind right now, it's like the anti-word that I'm like, I want to say this isn't security, would be like the quote unquote helicopter parent.
Sure.
Because that's not a sense of security. Maybe.
Likely. And I think what we often are meaning by that is that when the child needs to be left alone, needs some distance, needs to be safely distant, a parent who might be described as a helicopter parenting might not attune to that need. And therefore that infant is going to experience some invasiveness or overwhelmness.
Yeah. I don't know why, but it was circling my mind, so I thought I'd say it.
Yeah, so highly attuned or highly sensitive is not overly sensitive. It's not what we often mean by helicoptering. And securely attached kind of caregiving is comfortable with not knowing what the child needs and comfortable with the process of discovering what the child needs. And then becoming overwhelmed themselves or distressed themselves or checking out themselves.
I think what you're also saying to add to that is they're also okay with the spectrum of emotional responses.
That's right. Yep.
That they're okay with a need to have their own time. They're okay with being sad, being hurt, being lonely, whatever they may be.
That's right.
Make room for those experiences.
Yeah, and not lose the caregiving function. Yep.
Right.
Yeah, so I think security of attachment is going to emerge from repeated experiences, not of perfect parenting, but good enough parenting, good enough caregiving.
Which is huge. So while we're talking about this, we're definitely going into more detail, but while we're talking about this, that concept brings a lot of relief to so many of my clients.
It should.
The good enough parenting.
Yeah.
Do you want to expand on that?
I just want to say that I think attachment is a grace-based, grace-drenched theory.
Yes, absolutely.
That security of attachment is inherently forgiving. Right?
It's definitely not about perfection and getting it right the first time and only time.
Ever.
One pass.
In fact, perfection and the aim for it tends to be a signal to a kind of insecurity of attachment. Right. Yeah. That the security of attachment is comfortable with our whole humanness.
Yeah.
And is unafraid of it, and so a caregiver that is securely attached can remain present and remain engaged in the caregiving to discover the right or the needed need and the needed response to meet that need of the infant, which then creates in the infant a sense of themselves as they grow into children, adolescents, and adults.
But I was going to say, like, it even feels good as a child of an adult grown parent, adult child, when this is done.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
A sense that you got it, so I'm going to get it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it also a sense of when you don't get it and then eventually get it, I can have that same sort of, I didn't get it, but I will eventually get it without there being a threat to the relationship or a threat to the connection.
I think you're being kind. I'm thinking of like, I don't want to go to family Thanksgiving. Are you attuned enough to say, oh, that's what you need right now?
Yeah.
So even as a grown adult, myself, can you hear that? And can you make space for me?
Yeah.
And attune to what I'm going through.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Lend an understanding why that might be.
Right.
Yep. And tolerate it.
Cheers. The struggle is real.
Oh, goodness.
So something unique about secure classification that we've already mentioned a little bit is that there is a lot of freedom. There's a lot of grace that gets developed. As we are developing in that secure classification, which again, I think is a lifelong journey for a lot of people. But what might we see physically, relationally within relationship that would represent, oh, that security is existing?
Yeah. Well, probably in the most reduced, simplified form, there is a balance of attachment or relationship seeking behaviors, a valuing of relationships, a relying on other people, a balance of that attachment behavior, and exploration, play, discovery. Especially when we're looking at children, this balance of being able to take risks, to go explore the world now that they're able to walk and talk, and the foundational neurological development of attachment is coming to a particular end. Now they're ready to go explore the world and understand it. It's a dangerous world.
Absolutely.
And so when the child becomes frightened or particularly needy, they need to be able to return to that caregiver, the attachment behavior for comforting, soothing, reassurance. And it's that constant interplay and balance of exploration and reliance on others. Exploration,
right.
Risk-taking, and also effective relational needs. And that just gets nuanced depending on, we're talking about children or adolescents or young adults or adults and the different contexts that they're in. But the idea is that there is this balance between autonomy and also relating.
Right. Well, so one way we talked about in our previous episode is the secure classification has a positive view of self and positive view of other. So they're comfortable with their own needs, they're comfortable with their own abilities, but they're also comfortable being able to ask for help, to reach. And they have a sense within them that if they do reach, someone's going to respond. They'll be available.
And in its correlation, they're comfortable when others reach for them.
Right.
And they're in the supportive caregiving role. Yep.
So I think that's the beauty of the secure classification is I'm enough, you're enough.
Yeah.
Let's just live.
Yeah.
Let's just be.
Yeah. Which then allows a particular mind in the dyad, as we're talking about these two people, it allows them to really see the world as it is. It allows them to perceive accurately and not get distracted by the things that are unimportant. It allows them to think clearly. It allows them to take perspective, to know their own perspectives, to understand somebody else's perspective. I really need you and want you to be at Thanksgiving, but I can appreciate your minds, your needs, and they're different than mine. And it allows them to stay organized in their mind and allows them to remain emotionally regulated, which is very helpful under stressful situations.
Right. Well, the reality is when we're emotionally regulated, we have access to wisdom, to logic.
That's right.
And so it does make it a lot easier.
That's right. Yeah. When we are emotionally dysregulated, we can't access things that we already know sometimes.
Right.
We know better. Well, why didn't we do better? Well, perhaps because we couldn't access that wisdom or we couldn't co-access that wisdom. That's lovely. I like the way you say that.
Thanks. We have a last point that, and I don't know how to get to it, so I'm just going to ask you, what does secure classification have to do with our immune system and our physical body?
Yeah, I think a helpful way of understanding a security of attachment and why we should be concerned with whether we're talking about public policy, whether we're talking about education systems, whether they're talking about communities and families, or when we're just considering the needs of children. The security of attachment functions much like our immune system functions. So that when you have a properly functioning, a healthy functioning, an optimal functioning immune system that is getting developed in childhood, you're going to be able to ward off infections with greater ease. You may not be infected or you may not have symptoms or you may have a shorter duration of that illness. You may recover quickly and return to a higher or normal level of functioning after being sick. An immune system really matters.
Yeah.
And when we think of the attachment system as a immune system to deal with the risks and dangers of living life, including in relationships, but also how relationships are necessary to deal with the dangers of life, we tend to then see when there's that security of attachment, we are immune to suffering, certain kinds of suffering. We're never going to be immune from the difficulties of life, like death and aging and disease.
Right. And the world happening around us.
And the world absolutely happening around us. But we will be able to navigate, chart, weather those difficult situations, challenging situations in ways that then might actually make us stronger, make us wiser.
I love that. I've never thought of it in this languaging of like an immune system relationship, of being able to handle like whatever, like it may stick a little bit, it may bounce, there may be a little bit of recovery.
Yeah.
But the stronger the immune system, the less infected potentially. Yes. I don't know if I'm playing with the language for the first time, but
or the more likely we're going to return to a level of functioning. You know, when my wife dies tomorrow.
No, say it, not so.
Right? Because another mass shooting in our schools, or one of my 3 kids, either at college or in grade school, I'm going to be impacted, and I'm not going to be functioning very well.
Right.
If functioning means I'm not going to have the capacity to go to work, I'm not going to have the
not drink.
Yeah, I will likely engage in some extreme behaviors, or I will want to get away from some pain by numbing out or dissociating. So I will be gravely and forever affected by the loss of a child or the loss of my spouse. And as I move through life after those terribly tragic experiences, I will still be able to love and love again. And I will still be able to remain alive and enlivened in the world, even if I am forever changed.
Right.
And forever with a degree of grief. And the security of attachment is going to function in me that allows me to recover. Is a tricky word, I think, in this way. I'm going to recover from the flu. You know, tequila has that sort of reputation, I think, in American life of, I got sick on tequila in some sort of college binge, and I will never drink tequila again. Like, that's somebody who's not been able to recover from an experience.
Right.
And security of attachment allows you to recover from really difficult experiences, to love again.
And to be loved.
And to be loved. That's right. In that way, it's that sort of immune system. We want every child to have an immune system that is optimal and on all cylinders. And when we have children that have compromised immune systems, our community needs to adjust to ensure that that child is safe.
Right.
And so we want every child to have a secure of attachment because of that immune system kind of function. And when a child does not have that optimal secure attachment immune system, we as society need to adjust to accommodate that child in order to keep them as safe as possible. In this case, move them towards security.
Right.
And the degree to which we can do that in the medical context around immune systems is all the better. If we can restore people's compromised immune systems and restore them to optimal immune systems, then that person's going to be more capable of freely, autonomously explore the world and experience the world.
Yes.
And if they have a severe compromised immune system, they're not going to be able to freely
able to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, do that.
Wonderful. All right. I think it's a good time for a break.
All right.
Cheers again.
Cheers again.
All right.
Yeah, so why don't we keep the conversation going?
Can I say what I was going to do? I worked really hard not to say welcome back, and I didn't do it.
But we are back.
But that's what's happening right now. Because we took a break. We refilled.
We did.
Yay. We got to work this system out.
We
need like a little drink stand somewhere else.
Or I just need the microphone to be
We can do that
held
too.
by invisible wire. Yeah, so cheers.
Cheers.
We were filled to a...
It's still French 75. No, it's not. But
We're lying.
because I ran out of simple syrup because I didn't have enough for the first one.
We didn't have any to begin with.
So that's true. So I didn't make enough. So we're champagne with a little spritz of...
Yeah, I re-spritzed. I wanted it to be a little more mimosa-y.
Oh, okay. Nice. But mimosas will be a separate episode. This is just a continuation of champagne.
Yeah.
But we're talking about the secure classification going into that. We talked about the how it's developed, why it's important. And now we're moving on to some of the characteristics of it, the patterns, and ways we see it actually come alive. We're going to focus today mostly on adults, like what it looks like once we're all grown.
We might bob and weave a little bit.
So with that, just start off, I'll just ask, what are some general patterns, characteristics, things that would signify that someone is in that secure realm?
Well, I think the first for me that always comes to mind is someone who values relationships and feels comfortable in relationships and feels comfortable with intimacy.
That might mark that I'm obviously not.
Or that,
but like I said earlier,
so comfortable to
there are many
things.
things.
Just ooh,
yeah,
secure relationship.
Yeah, even I am not quite there. But yeah, I say even I, but I'm not.
Yeah.
So there are relationships in my life where intimacy feels awkward, uncomfortable.
Yes, and
but
that we're uncomfortable. Yeah.
But if we were, but if we were in that secure place, intimacy would feel quite normal, desirable, even
helpful.
It's a good word.
Necessary to our living.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
What comes? What's one of the things that comes immediately to your minds?
I think of it more. Well, because I work with couples mostly, I think in dyads. I think of those relational components. But when I'm thinking of couples who are in that secure place, one, we get real excited in session. I get real excited in session about that. Because there's a sense of ownership of a person's own identity of, oh, I do this. Like, oh, yeah, I did this when this happens. And, oh, of course, you did that when that happens. And that has nothing to do with whether you love me or not. It's just this thing that happens. And so, like kind of we were talking about earlier, of like the idea there's so much grace that's entered the room, grace and understanding, and room for each individual to be their own person and to have their own experience, and still, but knowing that, but overall we're good. Like overall, we're going to walk out of this room and we're going to be in a great relationship.
Yeah,
I don't necessarily love that great relationship part, but it's this idea of like, oh yeah, of course. There's so much curiosity and grace in a room when I know a couple is moving in and moving around in that secure place. But what is absent is rigidity.
Yeah.
I think that's more of what I see is an absence of rigidity, and it's just like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. This is fun.
Yeah, when I hear you say great relationship, I sort of just translate that into that the couple is feeling satisfied,
right?
Satiated,
yeah,
fulfilled by their relationship.
Right. They're walking out comfortable, not afraid to talk about something, not worried about not talking about something,
or
they're just
even
existing.
When they're feeling afraid, they can tolerate it.
Tolerate it.
Yeah.
Talk about it if they need to.
Yep.
Yeah. But it is I really like what I said earlier, that it's the lack of rigidity.
Yeah.
Because that's what couples come in with, is so much rigidity.
Entrenched in a pattern that is unsatisfying.
Of you stop doing what you're doing, I'm doing what I have to do.
Or its compliment, I suppose, is I can't stop what I'm doing.
Right.
And I don't know how to ask you to help me.
Right. I'm doing everything. So that's how I see it in the couples world, is as they're moving into security, a lot of rigidity goes away.
Yeah.
And there's a time and openness to exploration. There's a belief in the other person that they're going to be there ultimately if I need them. And there's a belief in their own ability to do whatever they need to do to stay and maintain and be in relationship.
And I'm not a fan of the languaging of owning. It's too capitalistic for me. But I think what you're saying is how I might word that, like a strong sense of self. That there's an awareness of
awareness. That's the word I was going to change it to. Yeah.
An honesty.
To help you out there.
To make me feel a little more comfortable in this capitalistic structure.
Yes. Much more awareness.
Yeah.
Of who I am, who you are.
And then also that they can communicate that. They can communicate effectively what their sense of themselves is. They can effectively communicate what their sense of the other self is. And it's accurate and it's effective and it's helpful and illuminating.
But also curious if they don't get it right.
That's
right?
That's
So they're willing to throw it out. It's flexible. Yes.
Yeah.
So I think that is, like, with security, there's so much flexibility. We used grace earlier.
Yeah.
Maybe a religious word would be flexibility.
Yeah. Yeah. The hallmark of mental health is probably flexibility. I don't think the yogi is trying to teach us how to all
rigidly
prepare us all to be Cirque du Soleil employees or performers. But a flexible body is going to be a flexible mind, because the body and the mind are so connected.
Right.
Yeah, flexibility so that they can even play with an idea, let alone play in a relationship. They can consider and think about things. They can play with an alternative narrative or an alternative understanding, or play with a alternative meaning of an experience in the past. Yeah, playful, flexible, curious.
Yeah.
Those all seem to swim in the same waters.
I think one of my own personal goals is the playfulness side. I think one of the hallmarks of, and we'll get to later on, my own strategy, my own attachment classification, but one way in which it manifests is that I don't play. I've rarely felt the ability, the freedom to be playful and to play. So that is kind of the superpower of a secure attachment that I am a little jealous of. Like, I would like to play more and feel comfortable in my play.
And to your point, or to your idea, or to your argument that we can have different kind of attachment classifications with different relationships. I have never not thought of you as playful. And I think that's been a quality of our relationship. That it has always been
playful,
exceedingly playful.
Absolutely. But I would say this, my relationship with you is rare.
Sure. And that's what I was going to get to. I wasn't going to say that, but I don't know how rare that is, because I've seen you in other relationships. Maybe my presence is affecting that. I don't know, but I think I wouldn't say it so rare, but I can acknowledge that, especially when something is challenging or something is difficult or something is uncomfortable, and it speaks to a kind of neediness in you, that you may lose some of your playfulness.
Yes.
And your ability to play with the need or play with the relationship.
Which this is really interesting. This may be completely cut out of the podcast, which is fine. But lately, I've had a couple of people respond to me on Facebook from high school, middle school and high school. I guess I'm just at that age where that starts to happen.
Sure.
And it's been interesting because a common thread is I just remember your smile, remember your laughter, and essentially saying, remember my playfulness.
Yeah.
And I'm like, did we go to the same high school? Like, did you actually, like, I just don't remember playing. I remember being terrified. I remember being very self-conscious, very constantly worried. And so, not enough. And so it's interesting to to know, again, this may be cut out. It's interesting to know that people held me and their mind in a much different way in which that I was attempting to work on my own attachment needs.
Yeah.
Yeah, and how that comes out. But yeah, right now, it is to me a superpower to be able to play. And that's kind of the goal I would have within myself of, becoming more securely attached, is the hope that I will play frequently and often in all realms.
And somebody has to feel secure enough,
right,
within themselves, within their own mind to do that.
Right, because you don't play when you're on the battlefield.
Yep.
And there's no room for it.
Or you don't play appropriately or effectively. Or, Yep.
So what would you say are some of the other benefits of...
or these characteristics of secure attachment?
Yeah.
Well, when we were talking about earlier, that immunity, that functioning immune system that security of attachment offers, we then tend to see in our research that when there are secure attachment classifications, these folks tend to not also suffer certainly the severe forms of psychiatric conditions, as opposed to in the insecurity of attachment classifications, you're going to see a higher prevalence.
Yeah.
They're going to be prone to be affected by the challenges of life, like things like all the dissociative disorders like PTSD or derealization, depersonalization, or dissociative disorders. You're going to have addiction more likely in the insecure, whereas certainly secure attachment folks are not going to be immune to any difficulty, but maybe the prognosis or the longevity of those psychiatric conditions are going to be mediated.
Yeah.
And they're mediated because of that highly functional immune system that secure attachment seems to provide. Maybe not bipolar, but maybe depressed. And maybe not depressed across many years, but a shorter period.
Yeah. Well, in some theory, it's not a curveball. We shouldn't plan on talking about this. But a word that comes to mind it's a overused word, but trauma.
Yeah, that will be a whole set of other things. But that's right.
Right.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the radical idea about attachment is that it seems to, when there's security of attachment established in that infancy, it seems to protect an individual from being traumatized by difficult experiences, adverse childhood experiences of divorce in the family or poverty, extreme instability in the home, be it moving or different people in the home. They seem to be not so traumatized by very difficult experiences because it's somehow protecting their mind, protecting the capacities of the mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
And hence why we really want to provide these optimal experiences of highly responsive caregiving, highly sensitive caregiving to these kids during these such crucial periods.
Developmental, yeah.
Yeah, these developmental periods. Yeah, but we'll probably come back to trauma.
Yeah. Oh, we have to, right?
1,000 times.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's resiliency. There's another
I think that's what I wanted to connect with that. The resiliency that is accessible when there is a sense of security.
Yeah.
Right? But
It's
again...
complicated. Resiliency is complicated because it can actually be masking an insecure kind of attachment strategy.
It can be your worst enemy.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think where I was going with that is, in my mind, it's the idea that, and again, we'll get into it later, but even in adulthood, when we have a secure connection following a traumatic event, that there's some researchers, there's some philosophers that would say that the trauma is not stored in the body or stuck even when we have the security of a relationship to move through that experience.
That's right. Yeah.
So it's metabolized different.
Processed, metabolized.
Yeah.
Yep.
Which I find very fascinating.
Yeah, that doesn't blunt the mind, nor does it get it entangled and chaotic.
Right.
Yeah, a whole other metaphor is to maybe think about our digestive system and and we'll maybe come back to that, but if you have a food allergy, you're unable to digest certain kinds of foods, and it creates a kind of inflammation and subsequent problems and other aspects of your health. And security of attachment is that sort of superpower to be able to metabolize, to be able to eat, digest, metabolize, and eliminate the waste of the world, of all of life experiences, including the sort of superpower, magical ability to not accidentally ingest poison. That's sort of the rub.
Yeah.
Is that security of attachment also seems to alert the mind to that's not actually food, or that's actually
interesting.
Poisonous.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to stay away from it.
Yeah.
And so when you have a compromised immune system, or you have a compromised digestive system, it can create all sorts of problems in your capacity to draw nutrients from relationships or the world or from your food.
Yeah, I really love that.
Another, I think, helpful metaphor.
Yeah. All right. Any others before we go?
Yeah, like 1,000 more, I suppose.
Any ones you want to highlight?
I personally like highlighting the concept of coherence. And that can get a bit academic, I'm sure, for folks.
Let's go.
But I still think it's important to nerd out a little bit there. There are people that I've worked with that are exceedingly troubled by their lives. And one of the symptoms that's very clear is they're unable to coherently organize their thoughts. They have trouble communicating their internal world. And one example could be a patient that begins a sentence and gets distracted by some thoughts and some feelings or sensations that he's having, and stops that sentence and begins another sentence, and again is troubled or distracted or veered off by another sensation or some sort of stimulation in the interpersonal field. And so his discourse, his conversation with me is not coherent.
Right.
And it reflects a mind that's not organized. And what comes with the security of attachment is the capacity to stay organized and coherent so that you can communicate effectively.
Right.
Both what you're needing and what you're feeling and what you're experiencing internally or environmentally, or you're able to effectively communicate and understand what someone else is feeling and experiencing. And so security of attachment, especially in terms of the scientific study and classification and assessment of attachment, one of the most important facets is looking at the way that the mind organizes on spectrums of organization to disorganization.
Okay.
Coherence to incoherence.
From like telling a story to, I'm trying to think of some of the assessments of how they measure that. It usually is through telling the story.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
I mean, in terms of the empirical validated means, there's the invitation to reflect on your childhood, or important experiences. And when someone is reflecting on those experiences, we can observe their mind staying organized or degrees of coherence. And so, an example might be, I'm starting to tell you a story about this relationship, let's say with my wife or my husband. And as I'm telling the story, I veer off into some other story and I never really complete the first story. That
sounds like a Friday night.
And that's a mind that is having a difficult time staying organized or staying coherent.
I think in other ways, and I don't know this, help me out if it doesn't match up, but part of the way I think of it when I'm talking to couples is it's much easier to stay coherent and to stay focused when you're not experiencing threat.
Yes. The only clarifying, the qualifying, the asterisk, what do you call that? I don't know. Qualifier is that what security of attachment allows is to stay organized in the midst of feeling threatened, because feeling threatened is an inherent experience in this threatening world. So we're never going to not feel threatened.
Right. So I guess so. The threat
in the mind when we are feeling threatened, can we stay organized? Can we stay coherent in the midst of feeling scared, threatened?
So let me tease out threat. So threat isn't necessarily a gun or evil or whatever.
Sure.
We may say war. Yeah. Threat is, am I enough? Or am I enough or am I too much? Like that's the kind of threat I'm thinking of. Like when we're not having to worry about that, so we can take on whatever's presented in front of us. So I guess it's more of a shocking word to say threat. But when I'm secure in who I am and who you are, it's easier to metabolize. It's easier to comprehend. It's easier to think.
Yeah. But invariably, we're going to be in a relationship that we might describe as secure. And we might even describe ourselves as securely attached in and of ourselves. Invariably, we're going to have times where we're not quite sure if you're enough for me. Or we're not sure if we're too much. And that's going to naturally
come up
maybe because I'm hungry or I'm tired or maybe because I'm particularly angry about something, or maybe because I'm particularly lonely or sad about something. And even in the midst of that felt sense of threat, I'm going to be able to work through it in a way that is efficient, effective, that reestablishes a connection and reestablishes intimacy.
Right.
I won't lose my capacity to take multiple perspectives. I won't lose that flexibility.
Yes.
And I'll be able to play. It may not be play, ha, 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 but it's play with, let me think about this in a different way.
Yeah.
In the midst of feeling those feelings.
I think what comes to my mind automatically is in the couple dynamic of when trying to initiate. And so being able to say, hey, I'm tired, or I have a stomach ache, and it's not code. It's real.
Yeah.
And it's, hey, that doesn't actually show my desire. It has anything to do with whether I want to. Right here, right now, I don't want to. And that's okay.
Yeah.
And there's security that this doesn't have to set up a pattern. This doesn't have to dominate who we are in this relationship, but it's just right here, right now. And that I'm grateful that you've asked.
I'm desirable.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm desirable. I'm enough. You're enough.
Yeah.
And right now I have a headache. Whatever the reasoning is, or I just got out of a really long meeting and I'm angry. And so it's like, this has nothing to do with just this moment that you want to be with me. And I can say, whatever's happening.
Yeah.
I want to tease this out a little bit more, but it's that sense of there is a threat. I don't want to let you down. I don't want you to feel rejected.
Yeah. And I'm not going to be meeting your need.
Right.
Or your desire or your request.
But we're okay. I'm okay.
Yeah. Enough.
I'm enough. Yeah.
Yeah. I know whatever reason it in that example, the alarm of that we may be, as we're talking about this, setting a too high of a bar, right? That in secure attached people and relationships, that there isn't an experience of threat,
right,
or miscommunication or misunderstanding, because that's an absolute characteristic and pattern
of humanity.
Securely attached relationships. There's going to be a miscommunication.
Yes,
there's going to be misunderstanding. That is absolutely a pattern of and a phenomenon.
But I would say even in secure relationship, like miscommunication is going to happen.
Insecure. Yeah. Right? Insecure. In space.
Interesting. Like we have not talked about that dynamic. The English language.
Yeah, like in the optimal, secure, attached relationships and individuals, misunderstanding, misattunement, misinterpretation is absolutely
It's going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's what I was trying to highlight.
Yes.
I don't want us to be unnecessarily and unfortunately setting an unrealistic sort of notion of what a pattern of relationships that are securely attached.
Because perfection doesn't exist.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's about how to respond in those moments and how are we able to reconnect, to reestablish, how
repair
easily are we able to regain the understanding, regain the attunement, regain the connection.
Yes.
Yeah.
All those things.
Yeah.
I'm glad we clarified. And that may be an ongoing thing. In space secure versus insecure.
Maybe we should say in the.
Okay. In the secure.
In a secure.
The things we learn along the way.
It's hard. Language is hard. But I mean, like maybe there's an example of secure attachment, right? Like, what are you saying?
Yeah.
What are you saying? No, that's not what you're saying.
It happened right here.
Why are you being a jerk? Stop being such a jerk, man.
You're wrong.
And furthermore, I'm right. And I need you to.
Right.
Yeah.
It plays out.
Absolutely. Like miscommunication is more common than uncommon.
Yes.
Misunderstanding is more common than uncommon. Misattunement is more common than uncommon. And in those secure relationships between two adults or between adults and child, misattunement, misreading, misunderstanding is the norm.
Yes.
And security of attachment is the ability to deal very effectively to minimize the negative impact of that. And in fact, leave each other feeling more connected, more understood, more safe, more fulfilled.
More is more.
Ebb and flow of you clearly misspeaking and mishearing.
Mishearing. I love that part. No, you misheard me. I heard everything I was supposed to hear.
Beloved.
Yes. I love how it enters and there's so much room for imperfection and to still be securely attached.
Yeah. Because the mantra is good enough. Good enough is really fantastic.
Yeah.
Thanks for being good enough.
Back at you. All right. We'll continue the conversation later.
Yeah. After these messages.
What sponsor do we fantasize is going to go right here?
Oh my God. Right here at that moment.
Is it a particular gin you're thinking of? Or champagne?
I know. I mean, that brought to you by whoever. Prosecco.
Yeah. I don't know who. Yeah. I have no idea who would want to.
I mean, I have
dare
ideas about
sponsor.
general,
Yeah.
but I don't have like a specific one that came at that moment.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah. I can't wait to see. Okay, bye.